There are losses in life that no words can ever truly capture. When someone loses the person they love most, time seems to stop. The heart quietly shatters, and the moments that once brought joy now echo only as memories in the mind. This is the story of Min, a young father. In less than a week, he lost both his wife and his little daughter, just 5 years old. His entire world collapsed, and all he had left was a small wristwatch, the last birthday gift he gave his daughter, still holding traces of her familiar scent. In the depths of despair, Min set out in search of a miracle, something impossible, to bring his daughter back from the dead. But what he found at the end of that journey wasn't a miracle. It was a quiet truth, simple, yet powerful enough to awaken a broken heart. Min used to be just an ordinary man like so many others. A small house, a gentle wife, and a little daughter who would chirp daddy every evening when he came home from work. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was filled with laughter and warm, simple moments. To Min, happiness was nothing more than seeing his wife smile at the dinner table or holding his daughter close as she told him about her sweet little dreams. But then, that happiness shattered in the blink of an eye. His wife, the woman who had stood by him through all the years of hardship, was suddenly taken by a violent illness. He never got the chance to say goodbye, never got to hold her one last time. And just days later, while the first wound was still fresh and bleeding, Min was dealt a second, even crueler blow. His little girl was in an accident on her way home from school, and she never woke up again. 1 week, just 1 week, and Min lost everything. The laughter, the warmth, all gone. Nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to live for. All that remained in his hands was a small wristwatch, the birthday gift he'd given his daughter not long ago. It still ticked, still counted the seconds, as if to remind him that time keeps moving forward, even when a heart has been completely torn apart. Min had no idea how he made it through the days that followed. The house felt cold and hollow, as if every sound of life had been drowned in a dull, colorless gray. He would sit for hours in silence beside his daughter's empty bed, staring at the tiny wristwatch she used to wear. Its hands still moved, ticking steadily with each passing second, but life had already left this home, left his heart, without so much as a goodbye. One quiet afternoon, as he sat dazed on the front porch, an old man passed by. The village elder who lived at the far edge of town, known by many for his strange ways and quiet wisdom. He stopped for a moment and looked at Min. His gaze wasn't one of pity, nor of sympathy. It was something else, something that simply understood. "You're carrying too much pain," the old man said gently. "Don't hold it all alone. Go find a hermit who lives in the mountains to the west. They say he has no magic, but everyone who finds him returns with different eyes." Min looked up, saying nothing. But that night, for the first time in days, he gathered what little strength he had left, threw on his worn-out jacket, and set off. Not because he believed, but because he had nothing left to lose. The path into the mountains was narrow and harsh. The wind howled through the trees, cold enough to sting the memories Min had tried so hard to bury. On his back, he carried a small backpack, just a few essentials, and the watch. His daughter's watch. He clutched it tightly, as if letting go would mean being swept away completely by the wind. Nearly a day's journey later, Min reached a small hut tucked behind a rocky ridge. It was old, weathered by time, surrounded by silent trees that rustled softly, whispering secrets only the wind could understand. Sitting outside on the porch was an elderly man, his hair and beard long and white, eyes closed, as though he were listening to something from deep within the universe. Min dropped to his knees, his voice raw and broken. "Please help me. I don't need anything else. I just want my daughter back. She was so young. She didn't deserve to go like that." The hermit slowly opened his eyes. They were deep, as if they could see all the tears Min hadn't yet cried. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer pity. He simply nodded and said, "I will help you. But first, there is one thing you must do." Min looked up, eyes brimming with tears. But for the first time in days, a flicker of hope sparked within him. A fragile light, like the glow of a single match in the middle of a long, dark night. "I'll do anything," he whispered. Just bring her back. Please. I'm willing to give up everything." The hermit remained calm, his expression unchanged. He spoke slowly, deliberately, as though each word needed to be weighed with care. "I'm not asking for anything grand," he said. "I've never demanded that anyone cross rivers or climb mountains or offer some great sacrifice. Just one simple task." He looked Min in the eye. "Go down a mountain and bring me a working watch. But there is one condition. It must come from a household that has never lost a loved one." Min paused for a second. Then he nodded. To him, it didn't seem like a difficult task. A working watch? That should be easy enough. Nearly every home had at least one. And surely, somewhere, there had to be a family untouched by loss. At least, he hoped so. He turned and began his descent, a fragile thread of belief pulling him forward. Against his chest, his daughter's watch rested in the pocket of his coat, right above the heart that once raced with joy each time he heard her little voice call, "Daddy." Min went from house to house. Everywhere he went, he was met with kindness, with warm smiles and open doors. People were more than willing to give him a watch. Some even brought out 2 or 3 for him to choose from. But each time he gently asked, "Has your family ever lost someone?" The answer was always the same, a quiet, sorrowful nod. One woman had buried her mother just a few years back. An elderly man spoke softly of the son he lost in a distant war. A third-grade child trembled as he mentioned a sister he would never see again. With each door Min knocked on, he didn't just enter a home. He stepped into a story, into a memory, in a grief that had once been fresh and raw, now softened only by time. By the end of the day, Min hadn't found a single watch that met the condition. Not because there were no working watches, but because there was no home untouched by loss. And as the sun dipped behind the mountain ridge, Min began to understand the real lesson the hermit had quietly asked him to discover for himself. On the way back up the mountain, Min no longer hurried. His feet still moved forward, but his heart was quiet, no longer torn between hope and despair. What he had seen over the past day wasn't just a collection of ticking watches, but fragments of lives quietly carrying the weight of loss, just like his own. He realized then that loss wasn't rare. On the contrary, it was inevitable, something every soul must eventually face. Some had lost parents when they were still children. Others had buried the love of their life after decades together. Even a little boy, just learning to spell, had already learned the meaning of the word death because his grandparents were gone. And though each person carried their grief in a different way, they still kept living. They still smiled, still worked, still loved. They didn't let sorrow bury the rest of their lives. Min suddenly thought of his gentle wife, the way she used to fold laundry in the warm light of the setting sun. He remembered the sparkle in his daughter's eyes when she unwrapped her birthday gift, the tiny watch he had given her. "Daddy, look, my watch is ticking. That means it'll never stop, right?" The memory stabbed at his chest like a blade, but this time, he didn't fall apart. He quietly reached in his coat, fingers brushing the old watch his daughter used to wear. It had stopped ticking the day she left. But now, to Min, it no longer symbolized loss. It was a reminder. That time waits for no one. That life doesn't freeze for our pain. And that love never truly disappears. When Min returned to the little hut where the hermit now sat in meditation under a faded sunset, the old man opened his eyes and asked only one question. "Did you bring me a watch?" Min lowered his head, but there were no more tears. His voice was steady and warm. "No, I didn't find a single family untouched by loss. But I brought back something else. I brought back new eyes, a new heart, and a new path to live." The hermit smiled softly, his eyes glowing as if he had been waiting for that answer all along. "Then that is enough," he said. "You are ready now to see what can never be lost." The golden light of sunset spilled through the trees. In the silence of the mountain forest, every falling leaf seemed soaked in something sacred, something words could never quite capture. Min knelt before the hermit, hands resting gently on his knees, head bowed low. But this time, there was no desperation in his posture, no pleading to bring the dead back to life. Only stillness and a quiet awakening. "Master," Min spoke, his voice no longer trembling. I no longer ask for my daughter to return, because I know no one can reclaim what fate has taken away. But please show me how to go on, not just to survive, but to understand, to walk forward without carrying a grave in my heart. The hermit looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were like a still lake, reflecting not just the man before him, but the deep, unspoken sorrow beneath the surface. Finally, he nodded. You have grasped what most fear to face, that death is not separate from life, and true life begins where we release. Not forget, but let go of the clinging. He pointed toward the small watch in Min's hand. Keep it. Let remind you that time is finite, but consciousness is not. Your daughter is not gone. She has only changed form, become the wind, the breath, the trees, and the beating within your own heart. Min's tears fell freely now, but they were no longer the tears of agony. They were tears of a soul being cleansed. Then, where do I begin? Min asked, with a humility that came from deep within. The hermit smiled gently. Begin with this very moment. With each step you take down that mountain. With each person you greet again. Live, not to forget death, but to understand it. To cherish every second you're given. And once you understand, you will no longer fear, and no longer blame. He placed a light hand on Min's shoulder, a quiet passing of something unspoken. No rituals, no chants, no miracles. Just one man who had lost everything, now standing with a heart newly awakened. Min left the hermit's hut at dawn. The morning air was pure, the dew still clinging to the leaves, and the breeze felt like a gentle hand guiding his steps. This time, he wasn't rushing. He wasn't holding on to the hope of miracles. He carried only one thing: awakening. The path down the mountain was still the same. Winding slopes, sharp cliffs, and the old trees that had witnessed his ascent in despair. But now, each step felt lighter. His heart still bore scars, but no longer drowned in sorrow. Min had come to understand. Pain is part of being human, but it isn't the whole of it. When he returned to the little house, the one once filled with his daughter's laughter and his wife's warmth, Min stood silently at the doorway for a long time. Not out of fear, not from sadness, but because he was learning to step in again, not as a broken man, but as someone reborn. He cleaned each corner, gently wiped the small table where his daughter used to scribble hearts. He folded his wife's clothes, then opened the windows wide, letting in the morning sun. The old house seemed to sigh, as if it too was ready for a new beginning. Every morning, Min hung his daughter's tiny watch by the window. Though it no longer ticked, it had become the heartbeat of memory. No longer something he wanted to fix, but something he had learned to cherish. He started gardening, planting the same vegetables his wife once grew. He sat with neighbors and spoke of his daughter with a soft smile instead of tears. And when children came to play, he welcomed them, even if his heart ached a little, because he knew that ache came from having loved deeply and now learning to love again in a different way. The villagers said Min had changed. He no longer walked like a man haunted. No one knew what had happened up on that mountain, but they all felt it. Something calm, something deep, like still waters after a storm. Min kept living, not to forget, but to remember well, not to replace what was lost, but to continue loving them. Through his actions, his breath, and every moment fully lived. Because now, he finally understood. Only when we truly accept death do we finally begin to live. Life doesn't let us choose who stays and who leaves first, but it does give us the power to choose how we live after loss. Min never got his daughter back, but he found something else. He found himself. He discovered a path through sorrow, not by denying pain, but by embracing it with understanding. And you, too, if you're carrying a wound that hasn't healed, remember this. Grief is real, but so is awakening. And sometimes, the greatest miracle doesn't lie in changing fate, but in changing the heart. Thank you for listening to this story. If you saw a part of yourself in Min's journey, let this be your gentle reminder to be kinder with your pain and with yourself. This is BraveSpark channel, where stories aren't just told, they ignite hope. See you on the next journey.